Hello, US 101 history class. Welcome to week 2. Um, so, I just want to mention a few things. I'll try to make this not as long. I just want to remind you to look at all the announcements that I have. I will not likely be posting as many in the upcoming weeks. I don't want to overwhelm you with a lot of announcements. I mainly wanted to give you examples and help you kind of see what you needed to do to understand what kind of work you're going to be doing for the rest of the semester. Okay, so I want to encourage you again to contact me if you're feeling confused and don't really feel comfortable with the work that's going on. If you didn't get the grade that you thought you should, or my feedback doesn't make sense to you, I promise you, you will only feel better that you contacted me. It won't be something you regret, because I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, and I know that you're contacting me so that you can fix whatever you need to get fixed. So let's make sure that you do that if you feel the need to, okay? That's the first thing I want to say. Second, as you're seeing, you have to have the Zen book at this point. I want to remind you, I said that the textbook is recommended, highly recommended. It's not required. The textbook, I think for some of you, will also help with some of the Sunday papers. If you like a kind of linear history and you're also maybe wanting to see things that I'm not covering or that are not covered in the Zen People's History book, okay? But for now, you definitely need to have the Zen People's History book. The Southern Thought one on dealing with slavery is something that, again, will be later. You will need it, but we will be going over that as we slide into the ominous Civil War, okay? That's going to take place. So for now, make sure you have that. And I want you to not lose momentum if you do the paper wrong or did the paper wrong or have stuff that need to be corrected. This is natural on the first week. And so just keep that in mind. Okay, so this week, you are also noticing that you see now 2 serious workloads. We have this amount of work that you just accomplished, that you took a week on, to be all due on Thursday, and then the same amount of work basically to be due on Sunday. Although if you notice, if you look, you have an extra credit optional paper for the next module, not required. So there's a little bit less work if you want to take a break, okay? But just keep that in mind. Then I also just want to point out again, on the links to the reading, okay, look, really briefly, you're going to look at this and you maybe are going to say, wow, this is so much reading to do. But you don't need to read everything word for word in such an intense way and get overwhelmed at making sure you've covered every paragraph of every page that's set to be read. If you want to do that, that's great. But you can basically get a lot of information in it by glancing at certain things. And when I have various articles and links into the readings, I'm mainly trying to help kind of add some different flavor of perspective, something into what you're going over, okay? So that's the main thing to look at. And again, you don't necessarily have to take such a heavy, full-scale reading of those texts necessarily. Now, I'll always post something that talks about in the world. And again, why am I doing that? If you don't remember from one of my previous announcements, we are doing just U.S. history as a focus, but I want us to always be aware that the world always exists outside of the United States. It always has. But the way that we often approach our own history and think of ourselves, we are in a sort of bubble here, okay? So my thought is as we get onto various topics, sometimes I will show a link to a world historic event that directly relates to our country's history, maybe diplomatic history, or maybe the subject matter, and other times it might just be a link to something that was happening somewhere else in the world that was very different and unrelated to what's happening to the history that you're covering. Just a kind of reminder of, hey, these are all the other kind of things going on at the time that we're covering in this class for this history. So that's the logic behind all of that. That's all I'm going to say. It looks like the weather is going to be calming down a little bit. It's been hit and miss over here. I didn't end up having any more blackouts, which is great. But there's still flooding in other parts for people who are close to water. And that's not just here in Santa Cruz. It's all over. So again, my empathy and my sympathy for any of you who are dealing with that. Okay, so having said that, I hope you're having a good week. It's Martin Luther King Jr. Day on Monday. And that's certainly a very important history to recognize. What I just want to say is that as we're going over this history, you are going to be able to understand what he was up against and why there is a Martin Luther King Jr. holiday in this country. And sometimes you might think you know why, but when we don't really understand all the history and the buildup from to the U.S. Civil War and then the failures of Reconstruction, we don't understand what segregation was about, how we got there, and why we're still in this kind of messy situation historically and figuring out what it means in the contemporary world now. Okay, so anyhow, so that's all I have to say, and we'll be in touch.